I'm Sarah Chen, 28 years old, and I thought I knew my family. That Sunday dinner changed everything. My parents sat across from me, smiling like they were about to announce something wonderful. "Sarah," Dad said, sliding the keys to my brand new Honda Accord across the table, "we've decided Emma needs your car more than you do. She's starting her senior year, and you're already established." The metal keys clinked against the wood as they landed in front of my 22-year-old sister, who beamed like she'd just won the lottery. What they didn't know would destroy our family forever. Have you ever experienced family favoritism so blatant it took your breath away? Drop your predictions about what happens next in the comments below, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe because this family revenge drama is just getting started. Trust me, the justice that unfolds will leave you speechless. The favoritism didn't start that Sunday. It had been Emma's world since the day she was born. I remember my 7th birthday when Emma, barely 2, threw a tantrum because I got presents and she didn't. Instead of explaining that birthdays were special days for the birthday person, my parents scrambled to find gifts for Emma too. That became the pattern. Sarah's achievements were footnotes in the Emma show. When I graduated valedictorian from high school, the family dinner conversation centered on Emma's finger painting making it onto the refrigerator. When I got my master's degree in marketing, they spent the celebration talking about Emma's decision to switch majors for the 3rd time. Every milestone I reached seemed to remind them that Emma needed more attention, more support, more everything. The financial favoritism was the worst part. My college fund, carefully saved since I was born, mysteriously shrank when Emma decided she wanted to attend an expensive private high school. "Sarah's smart enough to get scholarships," Mom explained when I questioned where my money went. "I worked 3 jobs through college while Emma got her monthly allowance deposited directly into her account. After graduation, I lived in a studio apartment and ate ramen for dinner while saving every penny. Emma moved back home rent-free and ordered DoorDash nightly. That Honda Accord represented 2 years of sacrifice. Every overtime shift, every skipped vacation, every generic brand grocery item contributed to that down payment. I researched models for months, negotiated the price myself, and felt genuine pride when I signed those papers. For the first time in my life, something beautiful belonged entirely to me, earned through my own effort, untainted by family politics. Emma's reaction to my success was predictably bitter. She made comments about showing off when I posted pictures of the car on social media. She'd roll her eyes when I mentioned maintenance costs or insurance payments, as if financial responsibility was some kind of character flaw. Mom would always jump to Emma's defense. "Not everyone needs material things to be happy, Sarah." The irony wasn't lost on me. Emma, who'd never been denied anything she wanted, somehow became the family expert on not needing material possessions. Meanwhile, I was painted as materialistic for wanting to keep the one thing I'd worked so hard to achieve. The gaslighting was masterful. They'd created a narrative where Emma was the humble, down-to-earth daughter, and I was the shallow success story who'd forgotten her family values. But I hadn't forgotten anything. I remembered every birthday where Emma got equal presents. I remembered every achievement of mine that was overshadowed by Emma's needs. I remembered every time I was told to be understanding, to be mature, to put Emma first because she was still figuring things out. At 22, Emma was still figuring things out, while I'd been expected to have my life together since I was 15. That Sunday dinner wasn't an isolated incident, it was the culmination of a lifetime pattern. My parents genuinely believed they had the right to redistribute my possessions to Emma because that's how our family had always operated. Sarah works hard, Emma receives the benefits, and everyone pretends this is normal and healthy. What they didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this moment for months. I'd seen it coming from the subtle comments about Emma needing reliable transportation and the not-so-subtle hints that my car was more than one person really needs. I'd watched them work up to this grand gesture of taking from Sarah to give to Emma, and I'd planned accordingly. The beautiful thing about being the responsible child is that you learn to think ahead. While Emma lived impulsively and my parents enabled her lack of planning, I'd been setting up my countermove. They thought they were playing chess with someone who didn't know the rules. They were about to learn that I'd been studying the game my entire life. 3 months before that disastrous dinner, I overheard a phone call that changed everything. Mom was talking to Emma about making sure she has reliable transportation and how they were going to handle the Sarah situation. The casual way they discussed redistributing my property like I was a child with too many toys made my blood run cold. That night, I called my friend Marcus, who'd graduated law school the previous year. "Sarah, this is insane," Marcus said when I explained the situation. "They can't just take your car. You're an adult who purchased it with your own money." But I knew my parents better than he did. They weren't planning to legally steal my car. They were planning to emotionally manipulate me into giving it up. The Sunday dinner would be theater, designed to make me look selfish if I refused their reasonable request. Marcus and I spent that weekend researching options. The solution was elegant in its simplicity. I would legitimately transfer ownership of the car to my boyfriend Jake, complete with proper documentation showing a private sale and loan agreement. If my parents wanted to give Emma my car, they'd have to explain to her why she couldn't have something that no longer belonged to me. Jake was hesitant at first. "This feels like we're playing games with your family," he said, always the voice of reason in our relationship. But when I showed him the years of documentation I'd kept, birthday photos where Emma got equal presents, graduation pictures where the focus was on Emma's outfit instead of my achievement, financial records showing the mysterious disappearance of my college fund, his tune changed quickly. "This isn't a game," he realized. "This is survival." We structured the deal to look completely legitimate because it was legitimate. Jake paid me fair market value for the car, and I signed over the title. We created a loan agreement where I would make payments to him monthly, essentially buying my own car back over 2 years. Every document was properly notarized and filed. From a legal standpoint, Jake owned my Honda Accord, and I was simply the authorized driver making payments on it. The paperwork trail was flawless. Bank records showed Jake's payment coming out of his account and going into mine. The loan documents outlined clear terms and conditions. The title transfer was properly recorded with the DMV. If anyone wanted to challenge this transaction, they'd find a completely legal private sale between 2 consenting adults. But the real genius wasn't in the legal documents, it was in the timing. I waited until my parents had committed to their plan, until they'd announced it to Emma, until she'd started making plans for her new car. I let them build up their expectations and Emma's excitement before revealing that the car they were so generously giving away was no longer mine to give. The 3 months between overhearing that phone call and the dinner were the longest of my life. I had to pretend everything was normal while watching my parents lay the groundwork for their grand gesture. Emma started making comments about needing better transportation for her senior year. Mom mentioned how nice it would be if Emma could visit more often with a reliable car. Dad talked about family helping family and how success meant lifting others up. Every conversation felt like a test of my acting ability. I nodded along with their hints and suggestions, asked thoughtful questions about Emma's transportation needs, and even volunteered information about my car's excellent maintenance record and fuel efficiency. They probably thought I was softening them up for the big ask, making their eventual request seem more reasonable. Meanwhile, I was documenting everything. Every hint about Emma needing my car, every suggestion that I should consider sharing the blessing of my success, every assumption that my possessions were family resources to be distributed as needed. I recorded phone calls with their permission, saved text messages, and kept detailed notes about conversations. Not because I planned to sue them, but because I'd learned that family gaslighting works best when there's no record of what actually happened. The night before that Sunday dinner, I could barely sleep. Not from anxiety, but from anticipation. For 28 years, I'd been the accommodating daughter who bent over backwards to keep the peace. Tomorrow, they were going to meet the daughter who'd learned to fight back with the law on her side. Jake squeezed my hand as we lay in bed. "Are you sure about this?" he asked one last time. I thought about every birthday where I'd been expected to share my presents with Emma. Every achievement that had been diminished to make her feel better about herself. Every time I'd been told to be the bigger person while Emma was allowed to be selfish. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I told him. And I meant it. Sunday dinner at my parents' house followed the same ritual it had for decades. Mom cooked enough food for an army, Dad carved the roast with ceremonial precision, and Emma arrived fashionably late with an apology that everyone accepted without question. The dining room table gleamed under the chandelier, set with Mom's good china reserved for special occasions. I should have realized this wasn't just another family dinner. The conversation flowed through its usual channels: Mom's garden, Dad's golf game, Emma's classes, and social life. I contributed appropriately, played my role as the successful but dutiful daughter, and waited. I could feel the anticipation in the air, the way my parents exchanged meaningful glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Emma kept checking her phone and smiling secretively, clearly in on whatever surprise was coming. It was after the main course, while Mom served her famous apple pie, that Dad cleared his throat with the gravity of a man about to make an important announcement. "Sarah," he began, his voice taking on that formal tone he used for serious family business, "your mother and I have been talking about Emma's situation." Emma's situation. As if being a 22-year-old college senior was some kind of medical condition requiring family intervention. "Emma's going into her final year," Mom picked up seamlessly, "and she's been struggling with transportation. That old Honda of hers is barely holding together, and we're worried about her safety driving back and forth to campus." I nodded thoughtfully, as if this was the first I'd heard of Emma's transportation challenges. In reality, Emma's old Honda was a perfectly functional 2019 model that my parents had bought her 3 years ago. The only thing wrong with it was that Emma was embarrassed to be seen in a car that wasn't the latest model. "We know how generous and family-oriented you are," Dad continued, "and we've come up with a solution that helps everyone." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a familiar set of keys, the spare set I'd given them for emergencies. The Honda keychain glinted under the dining room lights as he placed them deliberately in the center of the table. "We think Emma should have your Accord," Mom announced with the satisfaction of someone delivering wonderful news. "You've got your career established, you work mostly from home now, and Emma really needs reliable transportation for her senior year and job interviews." Emma's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Really? Oh my God, thank you so much. Sarah, this is incredible. I was just telling my friends how much I loved your car, and now it's going to be mine." She reached for the keys with greedy fingers, already claiming ownership. The silence stretched as my family waited for my grateful acceptance of their generous plan to give away my property. I could see the expectation in their faces, the assumption that I would be touched by their thoughtfulness, proud to help my little sister, happy to make this sacrifice for the greater good of the family. "That's really interesting," I said carefully, taking a sip of my wine. "There's just one small problem with your plan." Dad's brow furrowed. "What kind of problem?" "Well," I said, reaching into my purse for the folder I'd prepared, "I don't actually own that car anymore." The statement landed like a bomb in the middle of the dining room. Emma's hand froze halfway to the keys. Mom's serving spoon clattered against the pie dish. Dad's face went through several expressions before settling on confused irritation. "What do you mean you don't own it?" Mom demanded. "Of course you own it. You bought it 6 months ago." I opened the folder and pulled out the title transfer, loan agreement, and sales receipt. "I sold it to Jake 3 months ago. These are the legal documents showing the transfer of ownership, properly notarized and filed with the DMV." I spread the papers across the table like evidence in a courtroom. "Jake now owns the car." I'm simply making monthly payments on a loan to buy it back from him. Emma snatched the papers and scanned them frantically, her face growing paler with each page. This is fake, she said finally. You're lying. You made this up to be spiteful. Call the DMV tomorrow if you'd like to verify, I suggested calmly. The title transfer is on file. Or you can call Jake, he'd be happy to confirm that he owns the car you're planning to drive. Dad was staring at the documents like they were written in a foreign language. Sarah, what is this? Why would you sell your car to Jake? This doesn't make any sense. It makes perfect sense, I replied. I overheard Mom on the phone 3 months ago, planning to handle the Sarah situation regarding Emma's transportation needs. I realized you were planning to take my car and give it to Emma, so I made sure that wouldn't be legally possible. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Mom's face flushed red. You were eavesdropping on private conversations? I was walking past the kitchen when you were talking loudly on the phone about redistributing my property, I corrected. And I decided to take steps to protect myself from having my possessions stolen by my own family. Emma slammed her hand on the table, making the china jump. Stolen? Are you insane? This is about family helping family. This is about not being selfish. Selfish? I laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Emma, you're 22 years old, and you're throwing a tantrum because you can't have someone else's car. You want to talk about selfish? Girls, please, Dad interjected, but his voice lacked conviction. He was still staring at the legal documents, trying to find a loophole that didn't exist. No, Dad, let's talk about this, I said, my voice gaining strength. Let's talk about how you raised one daughter to work for everything she has and another daughter to expect everything to be handed to her. Let's talk about how Emma's needs always come before mine, how her wants become family emergencies, and how I'm always expected to sacrifice for her benefit. Mom stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. That is not fair, Sarah. We have always treated you girls equally. Equally? I pulled out my phone and opened the photo album I'd prepared. This is Emma's 18th birthday party, the one where she got a car, jewelry, and a weekend trip to Vegas. This is my 18th birthday, dinner at Applebee's and a gift card to Target. The photos told the story better than words ever could. Years of documentation, side-by-side comparisons of how differently their daughters had been treated. Emma's face grew paler with each image. Sarah, stop, Emma pleaded. This isn't about birthday parties. This is about you being vindictive and hateful. This is about me protecting myself from a family that sees my success as community property, I replied. This is about me finally saying no to being treated like the family ATM and Emma's personal benefactor. Dad cleared his throat. Sarah, even if the car situation is complicated now, surely we can work something out. Jake would be willing to transfer it back, wouldn't he? For family? The hopeful look in his eyes broke my heart and hardened my resolve simultaneously. Even now, facing legal documents and clear evidence of their favoritism, they still believed they could manipulate the situation to get what they wanted. No, Dad, I said firmly. Jake and I are partners. We make financial decisions together, and this was a good financial decision. Emma can figure out her own transportation like every other adult in the world. Emma burst into tears, the dramatic, attention-getting sobs that had gotten her out of trouble since she was a toddler. But I was done being moved by her performance. The family dinner was over, but the real drama was just beginning. The screaming started the moment I finished speaking. Emma's tears transformed into full-blown hysteria, the kind of breakdown that had always triggered immediate family mobilization to fix whatever was upsetting the golden child. But this time was different. This time, her tantrum couldn't solve the problem because the problem was me, and I was done being manipulated. You're destroying this family. Mom shrieked, her voice reaching pitches I hadn't heard since Emma's teenage years. How could you be so calculating? So cruel? We raised you better than this, Sarah. Dad tried to play mediator, his voice strained with the effort of maintaining calm. Sarah, sweetheart, I understand you're upset about something, but this isn't the way to handle family disagreements. We can work this out if everyone just takes a deep breath and... No. The word came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't soften it. We're not working anything out. We're not compromising. We're not finding a middle ground where Emma gets half my car or I co-sign for her loan or whatever creative solution you're cooking up in your heads right now. Emma's sobs reached theatrical levels. I can't believe you hate me this much. I thought we were sisters. I thought family meant something to you. The manipulation was so transparent it was almost insulting. For 28 years, I'd watched Emma deploy tears, guilt, and accusations of family betrayal to get exactly what she wanted. The performance had worked flawlessly every single time, with my parents rushing to meet her demands while lecturing me about being understanding. Family does mean something to me, I said evenly. That's why I documented 20 years of proof that this family has two different definitions of what family means, depending on which daughter you're talking to. I pulled out my phone and opened the folder I'd been building for years. Screenshots of text messages where my parents asked me for money while sending Emma on vacation. Photos from family gatherings where Emma's achievements were celebrated and mine were afterthoughts. Financial records showing the mysterious redistribution of my college fund to pay for Emma's private school tuition. This is my graduation from business school, I said, showing them a photo where Emma was making bunny ears behind my head while my parents smiled at her antics. And this is Emma's graduation from high school, where everyone cried tears of joy and threw a party for 200 people. Mom snatched the phone from my hands. Stop it. Stop this right now. You're being vindictive and petty, dragging up old photos to make some twisted point. The point is that I've been keeping records, I said calmly, taking my phone back. Every birthday where Emma got equal presents on my special day. Every achievement of mine that was overshadowed by Emma's needs. Every time I was told to be mature and understanding while Emma was allowed to be selfish and demanding. I have documentation going back to when I was 12 years old. Dad's face went white. You've been documenting our family interactions? Like we're criminals? Like I'm a lawyer protecting my client, I corrected. And my client is me, the daughter who's been systematically trained to believe her role in this family is to subsidize Emma's lifestyle and accept whatever scraps of attention and resources are left over. Emma stopped crying long enough to stare at me with genuine shock. You really hate us that much? You've been planning this for years? I don't hate anyone, I said, surprised by how calm I felt. I'm just done being the family sacrifice. I'm done pretending this is normal. I'm done accepting that Sarah works hard so Emma can benefit, while Emma contributes nothing but demands everything. The silence that followed was deafening. For the first time in my memory, my family had no response to Emma's tears, no immediate solution to placate her distress, no way to make the problem disappear by rearranging everyone else's life around her needs. Mom was the first to recover. Fine, she said with the cold fury of someone whose authority had been challenged. If this is how you want to play it, Sarah, then this is how we'll play it. Don't come running to us when you need help. Don't expect to be included in family events. Don't think you can just waltz back here when your little tantrum is over and everything will go back to normal. I'm not having a tantrum, I replied. I'm setting boundaries. And you're right, things will never go back to normal. Normal was unsustainable. Emma's tears started fresh, but now they seemed genuine instead of performative. I can't believe you're willing to destroy our entire family over a stupid car. I'm not destroying anything, I said. I'm refusing to participate in a system that treats me like an ATM with emotions. If that destroys the family, then the family was built on a foundation that needed to be destroyed. The words hung in the air like a challenge. I could see my parents processing the implications, realizing that their threats of exclusion and punishment weren't having the desired effect. For the first time in my life, they were dealing with a version of Sarah who couldn't be guilt, manipulated, or coerced into compliance. Dad tried one more time. Sarah, you're obviously angry about some things from the past. Maybe we can sit down and talk through these feelings, work on some compromises. The compromise is that Emma figures out her own transportation like an adult, I interrupted. The compromise is that my possessions remain my possessions. The compromise is that this family starts treating both daughters with equal respect and expectations. Mom laughed bitterly. Equal? You want equal? Fine. From now on, you're both on your own. No family support, no family help, no family anything. Let's see how equal feels when you don't have us to fall back on. The threat was meant to terrify me into backing down. Instead, it felt like liberation. Perfect, I said, standing up from the table. That sounds exactly like what I've been asking for my entire life, to be treated the same as Emma. Have you ever reached that moment where you realize the people you've been trying to please your whole life don't actually care about your happiness? When you understand that their love comes with conditions that require you to sacrifice pieces of yourself? Drop a comment about your own family boundary setting experiences, because what happened next will show you exactly why sometimes the nuclear option is the only option that works. As I walked toward the door, I could hear Emma's voice rising to a wail behind me. Sarah, please. Don't leave like this. We're family. I turned back one last time. Yes, we are family. And maybe someday this family will be healthy enough for me to be part of it again. But not today, and not on these terms. The door closed behind me with a finality that felt like freedom. Within 48 hours of our dinner disaster, my parents had contacted 3 different lawyers. I knew this because Jake started getting phone calls from legal offices asking about the legitimacy of our car transaction. Each call followed the same pattern, polite inquiries about whether the sale was genuine, whether any coercion was involved, and whether Jake might be interested in resolving this family matter amicably. Jake handled each call with the patience of someone who'd been prepared for this exact scenario. Yes, the sale was legitimate. No, there was no coercion. Yes, I have all the documentation. No, I'm not interested in reversing the transaction to appease people who tried to steal my girlfriend's car. The third lawyer was more direct. Mr. Rodriguez, I understand there may be some family dynamics at play here. Would you be willing to consider a financial arrangement that benefits everyone involved? Are you asking me to help you steal a car? Jake asked politely. The lawyer backpedaled quickly. Of course not. We're simply exploring options for resolving a family dispute. The family dispute is that some people think they're entitled to property they didn't pay for, Jake replied. From a legal standpoint, there's nothing to resolve. I bought a car, I own a car, end of story. By the end of the week, Emma had moved on to social media warfare. Her Instagram stories painted a narrative of family betrayal, with carefully cropped screenshots of our text message history and dramatic posts about toxic siblings and money-changing people. The comments section became a battlefield between Emma's friends expressing outrage on her behalf and my friends who'd witnessed years of family dysfunction. Emma's version of events was masterfully constructed. Sarah, the successful but cold sister, had manipulated legal documents to prevent her struggling college student sister from getting help with transportation. Poor Emma, just trying to finish school, was being punished by her wealthy siblings' vindictive scheme. The posts gained traction among Emma's social circle, with dozens of comments calling me heartless and selfish. But Emma made one crucial mistake. She posted photos of the old, unreliable car she was supposedly stuck driving. Her friends could do math, and several pointed out in the comments that a 2019 Honda with 30,000 miles wasn't exactly a dangerous rust bucket. The inconsistencies in her story began to show, especially when someone found her previous posts bragging about her car and complaining that it wasn't new enough to match her style. My parents' investigation took a different approach. Mom called my boss, pretending to be concerned about my mental health and wondering if there had been any changes in my behavior at work that might indicate psychological distress. The call backfired spectacularly. My boss was impressed that I'd been strategic enough to protect my assets from family manipulation and made a note in my file about my excellent problem-solving skills under pressure. Dad took a more direct route, showing up at my apartment building and demanding that the security guard let him speak to me about a family emergency. When the guard called upstairs to verify, I told him that my father was not welcome in the building and that any future visits should be treated as trespassing. The look on Dad's face, visible through the security cameras, was a mixture of shock and rage that I'd deny him access to me. The extended family investigation was the most interesting development. My parents had clearly reached out to aunts, uncles, and grandparents, presenting their version of events and expecting unified family support for their position. Instead, they inadvertently opened a conversation that had been brewing for decades. My Aunt Linda called me on Thursday evening. "Sarah, honey, your mother told me about this car situation, and I have to ask, is it true that they were just going to give your car to Emma without asking you?" "That's exactly what happened," I confirmed. "They announced it at dinner like it was a done deal." Linda was quiet for a long moment. "Your mother made it sound like you were being unreasonable, but, honestly, this sounds like the same pattern I've been watching for years." "Do you remember Emma's Sweet 16 party?" I remembered it vividly, a lavish affair with a DJ, catered food, and expensive decorations, all paid for with money my parents claimed they couldn't spare for my college expenses. "I remember thinking at the time that it seemed unbalanced," Linda continued. "But your parents always had explanations for why Emma needed more, why you were stronger and could handle less attention. I figured it wasn't my place to interfere." The conversation opened floodgates I hadn't expected. Linda had been documenting the favoritism too, just from the outside. She'd noticed the different treatment at family gatherings, the way Emma's needs always took priority, the way my achievements were minimized while Emma's were celebrated. "Your grandmother is asking questions too," Linda told me. "She got a very different version of events from your mother, but some things didn't add up. She's been thinking about patterns she's noticed over the years." By Friday, 3 more family members had called me directly. The investigation my parents had launched to prove my unreasonableness was instead revealing decades of documented favoritism that other family members had noticed but never discussed. Each conversation followed a similar pattern: initial concern about family conflict, followed by realization that the conflict stemmed from systematic unfair treatment, followed by apologies for not speaking up sooner. My Uncle Mark was the most direct. "Sarah, I owe you an apology. I've watched your parents treat you and Emma differently for years, and I told myself it wasn't my business to interfere. But when your dad called asking me to talk sense into you about sharing family resources, I realized I'd been enabling this dysfunction by staying silent." The most damaging revelation came from my grandmother, who called on Saturday morning with a tremor in her voice that had nothing to do with age. "Sarah, dear, I need to tell you something that's been weighing on my heart. Your mother asked me to contribute to Emma's car fund. Apparently they're trying to buy her something newer since your car situation fell through. But when I asked about your college graduation gift, she told me they'd already spent that money on Emma's spring break trip to Europe." The college graduation gift. I'd never received one, never even known it existed. My grandmother had given my parents $5,000 specifically for me, money that had been redirected to fund Emma's vacation without my knowledge or consent. "I'm so sorry, sweetheart. I should have given it to you directly, but your mother said you preferred practical gifts and they were using the money for your student loans. I had no idea. The pattern was becoming impossible to deny, even for family members who'd spent years making excuses for my parents' behavior. The investigation they'd launched to discredit me was instead revealing a systematic pattern of financial and emotional manipulation that had been hidden in plain sight for decades. Emma's lawyer consultation was the final piece of the puzzle. She'd hired someone to challenge the car sale, convinced that she could find a legal angle to force Jake to return the vehicle. The lawyer's assessment was brutal and swift. Not only was the sale completely legitimate, but Emma's parents had no legal standing to challenge a transaction between two unrelated adults involving property they didn't own. More importantly, the lawyer warned Emma about potential consequences of pursuing legal action. If she filed a frivolous lawsuit, she could be liable for Jake's legal fees. If she or her parents continued harassing Jake about the car, they could face charges of criminal harassment. The consultation that was supposed to get Emma her car instead gave her a legal education about the limits of entitlement. By the end of that first week, my parents' investigation had accomplished something they never intended. It had revealed the truth about their parenting to people who'd been making excuses for them for years. Extended family members who dismissed the favoritism as harmless preference were now seeing documented evidence of systematic financial manipulation and emotional abuse. The family group chat, which had been silent since the dinner disaster, suddenly exploded with activity. My parents found themselves defending decisions they'd never had to justify before, explaining financial choices that looked increasingly questionable under scrutiny, and confronting family members who were no longer willing to enable their dysfunction. Emma's social media campaign was backfiring too. Friends who'd initially supported her were asking uncomfortable questions about why a college senior couldn't solve her own transportation problems. The photos of her unreliable car were being compared to other students much older, actually problematic vehicles. Her narrative of victimization was crumbling under the weight of her own contradictions. But the most significant development was Jake's reaction to being drawn into my family's drama. Instead of being intimidated by lawyer calls and family pressure, he was fascinated by the psychology of it all. "Sarah," he said one evening as we reviewed the week's events, "I've been thinking about this car situation, and I want to make something clear. Even if your family apologizes, even if they promise to change, even if they offer to buy the car from me at twice what I paid, I'm not selling it back to them. You don't have to keep it forever," I assured him. "Once the dust settles." "No, you don't understand," he interrupted. "This isn't about the car anymore. This is about the principle. They tried to steal from you, and when that didn't work, they tried to manipulate me into being their accomplice. I'm not rewarding that behavior, no matter what they offer." That night, I realized something that changed everything. I wasn't fighting this battle alone anymore. I had an ally who couldn't be guilt, manipulated, or bought off. For the first time in my life, I had someone in my corner who was completely immune to my family's emotional terrorism. The investigation my parents had launched to prove my unreasonableness had instead armed me with documentation of their dysfunction and allies who were finally willing to speak the truth. They'd given me everything I needed to win a war I'd never wanted to fight. But the real victory was still coming. 3 weeks after the dinner disaster, my parents' carefully constructed narrative began collapsing under the weight of its own contradictions. The tipping point came when my grandmother decided to host a family meeting, not to mediate between warring factions, but to address what she diplomatically called some concerning patterns that have come to light. The meeting was scheduled for Sunday afternoon at Grandma's house, the neutral territory where family disputes had been resolved for 3 generations. My parents arrived expecting validation and support from the family matriarch. Instead, they found themselves facing a tribunal of relatives who'd spent the last month comparing notes and reaching uncomfortable conclusions about the family dynamics they'd been ignoring for years. Grandma had prepared for this meeting like a prosecutor building a case. She'd spoken to every family member individually, gathered their observations and concerns, and compiled a timeline of incidents that painted a devastating picture of systematic favoritism. The dining room table was covered with printouts, photographs, and handwritten notes documenting years of unequal treatment. "I've been thinking about Sarah's 18th birthday," Grandma began without preamble. Emma was 14 then, old enough to understand that birthdays are special for the birthday person. "But when Emma threw a tantrum about Sarah getting presents, you bought Emma gifts too. At the time, I thought it was sweet that you didn't want Emma to feel left out. Now I'm wondering if that was the beginning of a very problematic pattern." Mom's face was already flushing red. "Mother, we've always tried to be fair to both girls." "Fair?" Aunt Linda interrupted, consulting her own notes. "Sarah worked 3 jobs through college while Emma got a monthly allowance. Sarah saved for 2 years to buy her car while Emma got handed a Honda for her 19th birthday. Sarah's college graduation gift was redirected to pay for Emma's vacation. Where exactly is the fairness in any of that?" Uncle Mark leaned forward. "I've been thinking about this car situation all week, and I keep coming back to the same question. What kind of parents decide to give away their adult daughter's property without even asking her first? Even if Sarah had agreed to it, the assumption that you had the right to make that decision is deeply troubling." Emma, who'd been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. "You're all making this sound way worse than it is. Sarah has plenty of money. She doesn't need the car as much as I do. It was supposed to be a family solution that helped everyone." The silence that followed Emma's statement was deafening. I watched my family members' faces as they processed what she'd just said. That she genuinely believed Sarah's success made her possessions community property, that need trumped ownership rights, that family solutions could be imposed on family members without their consent. Grandma's voice was gentle but firm. "Emma, dear, do you hear what you just said? You believe that because Sarah has worked hard and been successful, her belongings should be redistributed to family members who want them more?" "That's not, I didn't mean," Emma started, then stopped, realizing that she had meant exactly that. "Because that's not how families work," Grandma continued. "That's how criminal enterprises work. Successful people don't owe their family members access to the fruits of their labor just because they're related." Dad tried to regain control of the narrative. "This is all getting blown out of proportion. Yes, maybe we could have handled the car situation better, but this is about family helping family. Sarah has always been the strong one, the independent one. Emma needs more support." "At what point does support become enabling?" Cousin Jennifer asked. "Emma is 22 years old. When exactly is she going to start supporting herself instead of expecting everyone else to solve her problems?" The question hung in the air like an indictment. For the first time, someone had vocalized what everyone was thinking, that Emma's constant need for support wasn't helping her develop into a functional adult, and that my parents' enabling wasn't kindness, it was sabotage disguised as love. Emma's response was predictable. Tears started flowing, accompanied by accusations that everyone was ganging up on her, that no one understood her struggles, that she was being punished for not being as perfect as Sarah. The performance that had always guaranteed immediate sympathy and problem-solving now fell flat in a room full of people who'd finally recognized it as manipulation. "Emma," Grandma said gently, "crying isn't going to solve this problem. Neither is blaming Sarah for being responsible and hardworking. At some point, you're going to have to learn that other people's success doesn't create obligations for them to share that success with you." The meeting continued for 3 hours, with each family member sharing their observations and concerns. The picture that emerged was damning: 2 decades of systematic favoritism that had created one daughter who took responsibility for herself and another who expected responsibility to be taken by others. My parents had raised Emma to believe the world owed her support simply because she existed, while teaching me that I had to earn love through achievement and sacrifice. But the most devastating revelation came from my grandfather, who'd been quietly listening to the entire discussion. When everyone else had finished speaking, he cleared his throat and addressed my parents directly. "You know," he said in the measured tone of someone who'd been thinking carefully about his words, "your father and I raised 4 children during the Depression. We didn't have much, but we had one rule: treat each child according to their character, not their needs. The child who worked hard got rewarded. The child who was lazy got consequences. We never took from one child to give to another, no matter how much the other child claimed to need it." He looked directly at my father. "You were the responsible one in your family, son. You worked after school, saved your money, helped around the house without being asked. Your brother was charming but lazy, always looking for shortcuts and handouts. Do you remember what happened when your mother started giving your brother money instead of making him earn it? Dad's face had gone pale. He never learned to take care of himself. And he spent his entire adult life bouncing from one crisis to another, expecting family members to bail him out," Grandpa continued. "Your mother regretted enabling him until the day she died. She said it was the worst parenting mistake she ever made, teaching one child that success comes through work and teaching the other that success comes through manipulation. The parallel was impossible to ignore. My parents had recreated the exact same dynamic that had destroyed my father's brother, and they were watching it play out again with their own daughters." Uncle Mark was the first to address the obvious question. "So what happens now? Sarah's not going to magically forgive 20 years of unfair treatment, and Emma's not going to suddenly develop work ethic and personal responsibility. How do we move forward from here?" Grandma looked at my parents with the expression of someone delivering a difficult but necessary truth. "That depends on whether they're willing to acknowledge that they created this problem and commit to fixing it. Not just apologizing to Sarah, but actually changing how they treat both daughters going forward." Mom's voice was defensive. "We've always done our best for both girls. Your best created a situation where one daughter protects herself with legal documents and the other daughter expects other people's property to be given to her," Grandma interrupted. "Whatever your intentions were, the results speak for themselves." The meeting ended without resolution, but with something more valuable: truth. For the first time in my family's history, the favoritism had been acknowledged, documented, and condemned by people whose opinions my parents valued. The conspiracy of silence that had enabled their dysfunction for decades had been broken. As family members filed out of Grandma's house, they made a point of stopping by to speak with me. Each conversation included some variation of the same message. They were sorry for not speaking up sooner, they supported my decision to protect myself, and they would no longer enable my parents' favoritism toward Emma. Emma left the meeting in tears, but they were different tears. Not the manipulative sobs designed to trigger rescue behavior, but the genuine grief of someone realizing that her entire worldview had been built on false assumptions about how life works. My parents left in stony silence, finally understanding that their family was no longer willing to pretend their behavior was normal or acceptable. The investigation they'd launched to discredit me had instead revealed the truth about them to everyone who mattered. The tables had turned completely, but the real justice was still coming. 6 months later, I was sitting in Jake's newly renovated apartment, our apartment now, watching him cook dinner while I sorted through wedding invitations. The Honda Accord sat in our assigned parking spot, legally and completely ours after I'd made the final payment on our loan agreement. What had started as a protective maneuver had evolved into something symbolic. The car represented partnership, mutual respect, and the kind of relationship where both people contribute equally instead of one person giving and the other taking. The transformation in my life was remarkable, but the transformation in my family was even more dramatic. Emma had been forced to confront reality for the first time in her 22 years, and the adjustment was not going smoothly. Without parents who would solve every problem and redistribute family resources to meet her needs, Emma was discovering that adult life required skills she'd never developed. Her spring semester had been a disaster. The reliable transportation crisis that had triggered the car conflict was solved when she finally accepted that she needed to buy her own vehicle, a used Toyota with high mileage that she could afford with her part-time job. But learning to budget for car payments, insurance, and maintenance while managing her coursework proved overwhelming for someone who'd never had to balance competing priorities. Emma's grades suffered as she struggled to adapt to life without a safety net. The academic probation letter arrived in March, followed by her teary phone call asking if I would co-sign a loan for a newer car since her Toyota was embarrassing and affecting her social life. When I declined, she accused me of enjoying her struggles and holding grudges. "I'm not holding a grudge," I told her during that phone call. "I'm watching you learn lessons you should have learned 15 years ago. It's painful to watch, but it's necessary." My parents' adjustment was even more challenging. The family meeting at Grandma's house had fractured their social standing in ways they hadn't anticipated. Extended family members were no longer politely ignoring the favoritism or making excuses for their parenting choices. The family business, a small accounting firm where Dad worked with two of his brothers, began struggling as family tensions affected professional relationships. More importantly, their friend network was asking uncomfortable questions. The story of parents trying to give away their successful daughter's car to their struggling daughter had spread through their social circle, generating exactly the kind of gossip and judgment my parents had always feared. They found themselves defending their parenting choices to people who'd previously considered them model family members. The community reputation they'd carefully cultivated was crumbling under the weight of their own actions. Church friends questioned why they'd tried to take Sarah's car. Neighbors wondered why Emma couldn't solve her own transportation problems. Their parenting philosophy, which had seemed generous and family-oriented from the outside, looked like enabling and favoritism when examined closely. But the most devastating consequence was the loss of their emotional manipulation power over me. For 28 years, the threat of family disappointment, guilt about not meeting Emma's needs, and fear of being labeled selfish had controlled my behavior. Once I realized that their disapproval wouldn't actually kill me, their entire system of control collapsed. The first test came in April, when Emma called crying about needing money for textbooks. In the past, I would have felt guilty about her financial struggles and transferred money immediately. Instead, I suggested she speak with her academic advisor about used textbook options or student loan increases. When she accused me of being heartless, I felt nothing but relief that her manipulation tactics no longer worked on me. The second test was Mother's Day. Mom called 2 weeks before the holiday, her voice carefully casual as she mentioned that she'd made reservations at an expensive restaurant for family dinner and hoped I could join them. The implication was clear: show up, pay for everyone's meal, and pretend the last 6 months hadn't happened. "I have plans with Jake's family," I told her truthfully. "But I hope you and Emma have a lovely dinner together." The silence that followed was profound. For the first time in our relationship, I'd prioritized my chosen family over my family of origin, and we both understood the significance of that choice. Jake proposed on a Tuesday evening in June, right there in our living room with no fanfare or elaborate staging. He simply looked up from his laptop where he'd been working and said, "Sarah, I want to spend my life with someone who has the courage to stand up for herself and the wisdom to choose better relationships than the ones she was born into. Will you marry me?" The ring was simple and perfect, purchased with money he'd saved from his promotion at work. We celebrated alone that night, holding each other and talking about the future we were building together, a future based on mutual respect, equal contribution, and healthy boundaries. I didn't call my family to share the engagement news. They found out through social media, like distant acquaintances, because that's what they'd chosen to become. Mom's text message was predictably manipulative: "I can't believe you'd get engaged without telling your own mother. I guess we're not family anymore." My response was brief: "We're family when you treat me like family. Congratulations on understanding the assignment." The wedding planning process revealed just how much my life had changed. Instead of navigating family drama and managing Emma's feelings about not being the center of attention, I was surrounded by people who celebrated my happiness without conditions. Jake's family welcomed me with genuine warmth, his mother treating me like the daughter she'd gained rather than the in-law she had to tolerate. My chosen family, friends, colleagues, and extended family members who'd supported my boundary setting, rallied around our engagement with enthusiasm and practical help. The wedding was shaping up to be exactly what Jake and I wanted, a celebration of partnership and commitment, unmarred by family dysfunction. But the most satisfying development was completely unexpected. Emma had started therapy in May, initially to deal with her academic struggles, but the sessions were forcing her to confront uncomfortable truths about her role in our family dynamics. Her therapist was helping her understand the difference between support and enabling, between family loyalty and family exploitation. Emma called me in late June, her voice different, quieter, less demanding. "Sarah, I've been thinking about a lot of things, and I owe you an apology. Not just about the car, but about everything. I never realized how unfairly you were treated, or how much I contributed to that unfairness." The conversation was hesitant and awkward, but it was genuine. For the first time in our relationship, Emma was taking responsibility for her actions instead of making excuses or blaming circumstances. She wasn't asking for forgiveness or trying to manipulate me into reconciliation, she was simply acknowledging the truth of our shared history. "I don't know if we can ever have a normal sister relationship," she continued. "I don't even know what normal looks like for us. But I want you to know that I understand now why you did what you did with the car. You were protecting yourself from people who were trying to take advantage of you, and I was one of those people." I cried after that phone call, not from sadness but from relief. For the first time in my life, Emma was speaking to me as an equal rather than as a resource to be exploited. The sister relationship I'd always wanted might actually be possible, but only if Emma continued the hard work of becoming someone worthy of my trust and respect. My parents made one last attempt at reconciliation in July, showing up at my office unannounced with flowers and apologies. They'd clearly prepared their speech, hitting all the expected notes about family being more important than past mistakes, about how much they loved me, about how they'd learned from this experience and wanted to make things right. But their version of making things right still involved me accepting their behavior and moving forward without any real consequences for them. They wanted forgiveness without accountability, relationship without responsibility, love without change. "I appreciate the apology," I told them in the office lobby, conscious of my colleagues watching our interaction. "But an apology without changed behavior is just manipulation with better vocabulary." Dad's face flushed with the familiar anger that used to terrify me into compliance. "Sarah, we're your parents. We deserve your forgiveness. We deserve another chance." "You deserve what you've earned," I replied calmly. "And what you've earned is a daughter who protects herself from people who try to take advantage of her, even when those people are related to her." They left my office angry and empty-handed, finally understanding that their parental authority had expired along with their credibility. I was no longer their dutiful daughter who could be guilt-tripped into submission. I was an adult woman who'd learned to recognize manipulation and had the strength to resist it. The wedding is next month, and the guest list tells the story of the life I've chosen over the life I was assigned. Jake's family, our mutual friends, colleagues who've become confidants, and extended family members who've supported my journey toward healthy boundaries. Emma will be there, not as my maid of honor, but as a guest who's working to earn back her place in my life through consistent changed behavior. My parents were not invited. The decision was painful but necessary, a final acknowledgement that some relationships are too toxic to salvage, even when they're with people you're supposed to love unconditionally. Unconditional love, I've learned, doesn't mean accepting unconditional abuse. The Honda Accord will be decorated with just married signs after the ceremony, carrying Jake and me toward our honeymoon and our future together. The car that started as a symbol of my hard work and my family's entitlement has become something else entirely, a representation of partnership, respect, and the courage to protect what matters most. Sometimes karma doesn't look like punishment or revenge. Sometimes it looks like peace, prosperity, and the kind of love that builds you up instead of tearing you down. Sometimes justice is as simple as choosing better relationships and having the strength to maintain the boundaries that protect them. Emma texted me last week with news that she'd made Dean's List for the first time in her college career. She's working 2 jobs now, managing her own finances, and learning what it feels like to earn things instead of having them handed to her. The struggle is making her stronger, kinder, and more appreciative of genuine support when it comes her way. My parents are still trying to figure out how to have a relationship with Emma now that she's no longer willing to be their golden child who accepts everything without question. They're learning that healthy relationships require mutual respect, and respect can't be demanded, it has to be earned through consistent, trustworthy behavior. Have you ever had to choose between toxic family relationships and your own peace of mind? Have you experienced that moment when you realize that setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's survival? Share your stories in the comments below, because your experiences might help someone else find the courage to protect themselves from family members who mistake love for control. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more real-life family drama and justice-served stories. Share this video with anyone who needs to hear that it's okay to prioritize your well-being over family expectations, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's harmful behavior. Thank you for taking this journey with me, for supporting my decision to choose health over history, and for understanding that family isn't just about blood, it's about love, respect, and mutual support. Here's to building the kinds of relationships that lift us up instead of tearing us down, and to having the courage to walk away from anything that doesn't serve our highest good. Remember, you don't owe anyone access to your life just because you're related to them. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness, especially by the people who claim to love you most. Trust your instincts, protect your peace, and never apologize for refusing to be someone's doormat, even when that someone is family. The best revenge isn't destruction or cruelty. The best revenge is living well, choosing wisely, and building a life so full of genuine love and respect that toxic people's absence feels like a gift rather than a loss. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is simply refuse to play games that were designed for you to lose.